Your Reilly Fact is on tonight.
Senators impugn the motives and conduct of our colleague from Alabama.
I ask leave of the Senate to continue my remarks. I appeal the ruling.
Objection is heard. The senator will take her seat.
Far-left Senator Elizabeth Warren scolded for trying to impeach the character of Senator Jeff Sessions. An amazing display. We'll have the inside story.
I belong to Europe and to the European culture, and the Muslims belong to the places where they came from.
A shocking new poll from London on whether Europeans want to continue with open Muslim immigration. Also ahead, Lou Dobbs and I on the biggest threats to America.
Caution. You are about to enter the no spin zone. The factor begins right now. Hi, I'm Bill O'Reilly. Thanks for watching us tonight. Adventures on the far left. That is the subject of this evening's Talking Points memo. As you may know, the Democratic Party is split between moderates and far left folks, but it is the ideological zealots to get most of the attention. This week, Betsy DeVos was confirmed as Education Secretary, but before that vote took place, liberal bomb thrower Al Franken attacked Ms. DeVos in the Senate.
It was one of the most embarrassing scenes I've witnessed during my time in the United States Senate. In fact, I believe it may have been one of the most embarrassing performances by a nominee in the history of the United States Senate.
Now, the reason Franken does not like Betsy DeVos is that she's a champion of school choice. She has devoted much of her life trying to bring quality education to poor kids, often trapped in bad inner-city schools. You'd think that an uber-liberal like Franken would approve of trying to help poor children, but he does not. Why? Because by offering school vouchers and encouraging charter schools, which are run apart from the public school system, Ms. DeVos is challenging the powerful teachers' unions. And those unions and their associates have donated more than $150,000 to Al Franken's campaigns. How enlightening. So Franken, like many politicians, panders to those who give him money. It's beyond question that poor American children, often minorities, are not getting the same quality of education that middle-class and wealthy children are getting. So why not try something new? Why not try school choice? Why not give poor parents subsidies to choose better schools for their kids? Why not? How long are we going to put up with discrimination against the poor? How long, Al? In another far-left adventure, Senator Elizabeth Warren, as close to a socialist as you can get, attacked Senator Jeff Sessions in hearings over whether Mr. Sessions should become the new Attorney General. What Warren did was try to read a letter written by Coretta Scott King 31 years ago, 31, that criticized Mr. Sessions. It all had to do with the senator prosecuting a voter fraud case in Alabama while he was a U.S. attorney there. The situation involved 3 civil rights activists who Sessions believed were committing voter fraud. The 3 were ultimately acquitted of the charges, and Mrs. King was furious with the case. Again, that was 31 years ago. But last night, seeking to paint Jeff Sessions as a racist, Warren brought it up in the Senate.
Senators impugn the motives and conduct of our colleague from Alabama as warned by the chair. Senator Warren, quote, said Senator Sessions has used the awesome power of his office to chill the free exercise of the vote by black citizens.
I am surprised that the words of Coretta Scott King are not suitable for debate in the United States Senate. I ask leave of the Senate to continue my remarks.
Is there objection?
Object.
I appeal the ruling.
Objection is heard. The senator will take her seat.
Later, Senator Warren read the letter on Facebook. Now, you can decide whether the far left is really looking out for the country by objecting to school choice and trying to smear a man like Senator Sessions. That call is entirely up to you. But what is crystal clear is the huge divide between the attitudes of the far left and moderates in the Democratic Party, not to mention Republicans, where there is no common ground at all. Talking Points believes that honest debate is necessary, but part of that equation is letting you know what's really going on behind the scenes. Thus, tonight's memo. Now for the top story reaction with us here in New York City, Eric Bolling and Geraldo Rivera. Am I going wrong, Geraldo?
Well, you know, the call for robust and sincere debate in the United States Senate, I think that even you will admit, Bill, is sophomoric at this point. These are two sides that really hate each other. You saw it in the election, how close it was. The winning candidate getting the Electoral College majority, the losing candidate getting almost 3 million more votes. They are energized, the left. It is the Frankens and Warrens of the Democratic Party who have shown that they've got the spirit to fight. The leaders of the Democratic Party have absolutely wimped out. They blew the election big time by failing to campaign in the Midwest, I think now. The rallying cry will be, remember Merrick Garland.
This far left stuff is going to re-energize the Democratic Party to take back power? Is that what you think?
I think they are a party that exists in name only. I think that these leftists will energize it so that it might recover in the midterm, in time for the midterm elections.
What do you say?
I think the Democrats realize that they can't win any of these. They can put a big fight. They can get on TV. They love the TV cameras. Every one of them, the louder they go or the more provocative things they say, they get TV camera, they get exposure on the Reilly factor. But I will tell you, I think this is a brilliant strategy by the GOP, and I hope that the White House is involved. For Mitch McConnell, knowing he has Sessions locked up, he's going to get Sessions as his Attorney General, to stop Elizabeth Warren in her tracks while she's reading a letter from Coretta Scott King, to stop her in her tracks, thereby giving her all this political cred. He just gave her.
So you're saying the exact opposite of what Rivera is saying.
What I think is she's raising money. I think they gave her 2020 political ad when she runs against Trump, and Trump says, you know what?
But you guys are so far apart. You say that it's a destructive thing for the Democratic Party in the long run, that most Americans aren't going to go this far left. You say that you think Americans are going to convince to go to
I say extreme? This is gross hypocrisy. I saw with my own eyes Senator Ted Cruz called the majority leader Mitch McConnell a liar on the floor of the Senate, and I didn't see anybody raise this rule to say that Senator Ted Cruz was violating the rules of the Senate. Sit down as if you're a 6th grade school child.
Well,
I mean, for goodness sakes, I mean, it's
politics. There are rules.
Politics is right. That I agree with.
There are rules in the Senate because before the Civil War, the people were caning each other.
Well, that's what it's going to come to. This was, Orrin Hatch called it famously, the world's most greatest deliberative body. The world's greatest deliberative body.
They fancy themselves civilized.
Well, fasten your seatbelts for the next 2 years. It's going to be street fight. It's going to be street fight.
That was brilliant long game strategy, not short game strategy. Long game strategy.
You guys disagree. Rivera thinks that most Americans are, for some reason, going to go over to the Elizabeth Warren, Al Franken side.
Most Democrats or most people who did not vote for Donald Trump are either fearful right now or they are angry.
That's all going to see
Fear
how
and anger will motivate, and they are insisting that these wimps that represent them get their curve.
I don't think that's ever going to happen.
Line and sinker, she bit onto that because she saw her opportunity to get the spotlight, to get that big, massive push, and now everyone's going to throw money at her. She's going to. Cory Booker. Did anyone mention Cory Booker today?
No.
No one mentioned Cory Booker. Did anyone mention Pelosi?
This is a letter by Coretta Scott King.
Right.
This is Coretta Scott King. You're not going to read her letter?
Scott King. No.
What?
Of course, she
I mean,
probably.
she's not reading it from some far left wacko or some far right.
She probably had a right to read that letter. But Mitch McConnell and hopefully the White House realizes
that she didn't have the right to read the letter is if you allow a letter read by Coretta Scott King or anybody else, you have to let all. And it's what they call hearsay.
They let them read the letter later in the day.
Well, whatever it is, there are rules that you can't impugn. Impugn the character of another fellow senator, which clearly she was doing by implying he was a racist.
I think they led her right into the trap.
Your whole idea about 31 years, I think, is really off the mark, because here is a senator who grew up in the Deep South, who really had a checkered past in terms of civil rights. He went through a personal evolution, an arc, which I think he should not run away from.
Robert Byrd.
He should embrace. Strom Thurmond. He should embrace it as part of America's changing
whether he's
face.
embracing anything, I don't care that it was 31 years ago. All right? I think that he presents his case and that the other side, Warren, presents their case, and then you have the vote. And he's going to be the Attorney General. That's what's going to happen. Okay? But you have to have decorum in the Senate. You can't have people smearing each other as racist. That's not allowed. But what about Franken? We're giving him a pass. He doesn't want the poor kids to have better schools.
Well, you and Franken should have had your knife fight years ago before he was elected.
No, I'm nonviolent. I'm not gonna, and plus,
Franken is very articulate, very entertaining.
No, he's not.
He's raising
He's
money.
so short.
He's funny. He may be short.
Yeah, that I'd have to have a knife. I don't. Maybe one of those little Swiss Army knives, because you'd keep missing them. But he doesn't want the poor kids to have good education.
If you want to argue about charter schools, that's a whole different
They saw that coming, though. They earmarked the DeVos nomination as the one they were going to fight because of what you said.
Obsessed.
Because you wanted to have guns for shooting grizzly bears in schools, Eric.
You're obsessed. Bowling's obsessed, and Rivera's so out to lunch. The counter is closed. All right, gentlemen. Next on the rundown, Senator will weigh in, a real senator, on the Sessions situation and talk about President Trump's travel ban. Then later, Miller on the mystery of Tom Brady's missing jersey. Texas Rangers have been assigned to crack the case. Those reports after these messages. Impact segment tonight, Federal Court of Appeals still deliberating the legality of President Trump's refugee order designating 7 countries for a holdup in entry to America. That on top of a number of new policy instructions by the administration. Joining us from Washington, Senator Ben Sasse from Nebraska. First of all, your reaction to your colleague Elizabeth Warren and what she tried to do to Jeff Sessions.
Well, first of all, I just heard your last segment, and I think Geraldo predicted that we need to bring canes back on the floor of the Senate in the future. I think I heard references to grizzlies and knives. Let's face it, the Senate has fancied itself the greatest deliberative body in the world for 240 years, and for quite a long time it hasn't been that. That doesn't mean we should abandon that. That means we should go back to actually debating the biggest problems that face America. Right now, the Senate isn't a very serious place. It needs to be again, and it's unfortunate when rules like that are violated.
Do you think that Senator Warren should have been allowed to read Mrs. King's letter?
You know, I think that there's all sorts of really important history of the civil rights movement that we should be celebrating, but the Rule 19, I know nothing says primetime television like esoteric rules of the U.S. Senate, but Rule 19 makes it clear that you can't impugn the motives of another senator, and you can't do it even by putting it in somebody else's voice, so it's a violation of the rules.
It was a clear violation, but Senator Warren doesn't seem to respect the rules as they are written. Now, you have not been a fan of Donald Trump's. But his cabinet selections are embraced by the majority of the Republicans holding office. What say you about them?
Yeah, I think he's named a lot of really, really strong folks. General Mattis, let's start there, is an absolute rock star. When you talk to people at the Pentagon who've worked there over the course of the last 50 years, there's probably no one who's been held in higher esteem there in 50 years. I'm 44. I know a bunch of guys my age or a few years younger who were at the Pentagon when Mattis was there. It was sort of end of their active duty careers when he was running the Marines. And a lot of them say if he'd lead men into battle today, they'd quit their jobs and try to beg their wives to let him go and follow him into battle. There are a lot of good folks like that. The Mattis-Tillerson axis on formulating a foreign policy for the age of non-state actors and cyber war and jihad. There's a lot of really good picks. But frankly, let's acknowledge the single most significant thing the president's done in these first 3 weeks, and frankly, maybe the biggest thing that any president can do in the next 3 or 4 years, is Neil Gorsuch is an absolute rock star.
All right.
People all across the
Judge
political
Gorsuch
spectrum should celebrate him.
Today actually criticized the president for his remarks about the judge who stalled the refugee thing. Let's get to that refugee executive order.
Sure.
You know, 7 nations, all of those nations are out of control. Anybody can get on a plane in Tripoli, go to Paris, change planes, and come to Kennedy in New York. You have objected to the order. Why?
Well, first of all, let's back up. I affirm the goal of what the president's trying to do. Fundamentally, we haven't taken borders seriously enough in this country for a really long time, and we need to do more rigorous vetting of people who are coming to this country, specifically from places where you have failed states. So Syria and Libya, where there isn't functionally any central government, you have terror training grounds. So the goal of the order is a good goal. I affirm the president's objective there. Now, the details also matter. We're the kind of nation nation that keeps our word. And we have translators who fought alongside
But that has all
American
been
troops.
corrected from what I understand.
And my criticism of the order was at the beginning that the rollout was so
now you're
clunky that
okay
it
with
caused
it?
problems. There are a lot of details still to be worked out in the implementation. If you know people working in the airports trying to implement the order, obviously there's a stay in place now, but there are details that General Kelly's trying to get done. I think they're making a lot of important steps.
Okay. And finally, your overall assessment of President Trump. You weren't a fan, but he's in there for 4 years. How do you think he's doing so far?
Well, first of all, I think we need to do a much better job in this country distinguishing between campaigns and governance. We've had an election now. It doesn't matter whether people voted for Donald Trump or
tell me
Hillary Clinton
how
or
you
Daffy
think
Duck.
he's doing. Done a lot of things in 3 weeks. How's he doing?
He's disrupted a lot of stuff. I think some of it is really, really good. I think the regulatory reform pathways that they're on are really strong. I think his cabinet picks have been strong. I think his Supreme Court pick is a home run. I also think it's really important in America. I spend a lot of my time with students. When I'm traveling Nebraska, I speak at elementary schools, middle schools, high schools, colleges, and they don't know basic civics. They don't understand the First Amendment. They don't know why the beating heart of America is freedom of speech, religion, press, assembly, the right of protest. We need to celebrate those things, and I don't think we're doing a very good job of that. You mentioned last night's discord in the Senate. That's not celebrating the beating heart of America, and we need to do a better job of that.
I got to go, but you're giving him a B so far? B?
Hey, we have 3 separate but equal branches. It's not my job to grade the president.
Not my job.
It's
Sound
to
like
root for his
the late
success.
Freddie Prinze. Not my job. All right, Senator. Always good talking to you.
Thanks,
Directly
Bill.
ahead, shocking new poll out of Europe says Muslim immigrants are no longer wanted there. Then Lou Dobbs and I will discuss the biggest threats to America right now. Doctor's coming right back. Dr. Bob segment tonight, Muslim immigration survey by Chatham House of more than 10,000 Europeans. Kind of shocking. Poll was taken before President Trump's executive order was announced on January 27th, constraining refugees from 7 predominantly Muslim countries. Chatham survey asked, do you think all further migration from mainly Muslim countries should be stopped in Europe? 55% say yes. Just 20% say no. 25% didn't answer. Joining us from Washington, Dr. Niall Gardner, director of the Heritage Foundation's Margaret Thatcher Center for Freedom. So what does that survey tell you, Doctor, and is it a legitimate organization, Chatham?
Well, it's certainly a legitimate organization. This is a very powerful poll. Chatham House, the Royal Institute of International Affairs, is arguably Britain's most prestigious think tank. So this is a very, very serious survey by a serious institution. It also covers 10,000 people across 10 countries throughout Europe. So it's a very, very big survey. And I think it's one of the most important surveys that we've seen in Europe in recent years with regard to attitudes towards immigration, and also reflecting tremendous fear, anxiety in Europe with regard to the huge influx of refugees that have come into Europe over the last 2 years. So this is a big poll which does reflect, I think, widespread concern with regard to mass immigration into Europe and also with regard to the refugee crisis.
Now, the low number that's what surprised me. 55%, I wasn't that surprised because there are a lot of social problems associated with the Muslim migration into Europe. But there's, 20% say, yeah, we want to continue this. That's probably just the Muslims themselves, right?
I mean, it's a striking figure there, Bill. And there's no doubt about it. I think the wave of Islamist terror attacks that we have seen across Europe, from France to Belgium to Germany, in the last couple of years have had a huge impact. And without a doubt, I think that, there's a real sense of foreboding across much of Europe, and a real concern that there are more Islamist terror attacks to come. And so I think that poll really captures that sense of fear. And I think that there are concerns, of course, on both sides of the Atlantic with regard to the broader Islamist threat. And, of course, the recent executive order by the White House reflected that as well. And so there are common concerns, common fears on both sides.
But in America, it's like 50-50 about that order. But in Europe, this is bad news for the Angela Merkel set and the liberal politicians. If this is true and this holds, you're going to see a stream of right-wing politicians seize power in Europe and in a bunch of other countries.
Yeah, I think it's ironic that you've seen, for example, Angela Merkel, Francois Hollande, for example, the leaders of Germany and France, condemning President Trump over his executive order, while at home, of course, there is huge concern and fear over the refugee issue and mass immigration. And without a doubt, I think you do have European elites in power who are deeply out of touch with their own populations, and the open borders policy implemented by Angela Merkel.
That's what led to Brexit.
Which led to 1.3 million refugees flowing into Germany. This has had a huge impact across Europe, and I think there's been a widespread rejection of Merkel's open borders approach by most European publics.
All right, Doctor, we appreciate it as always. Thank you. Plenty more ahead as the Factor moves along this evening. Apparently, Tom Brady's Super Bowl jersey was stolen. Dennis Miller has some thoughts on the Texas Rangers getting involved in the case. But next, Lou Dobbs and I will assess the most serious threats to the USA. We hope you stay tuned for those reports.
Live from America's News headquarters, I'm Jackie Ibanez in New York. The Senate confirming Republican Senator Jeff Sessions as Attorney General. The senators voting 52 to 47 in favor of Sessions. All but one Democrat voted against Sessions, President Trump's pick for Attorney General. Republicans say Sessions is committed to justice and the rule of law, but Democrats fought his nomination, saying he is weak on civil rights and too harsh on immigrants.
Lose the Boss segment tonight, a compelling question. What are the biggest threats to America right now? Here now, Fox Business star Lou Dobbs. I have two that might surprise you, but you go first.
All right, I think the first and most immediate threat is the left wing in this country, the liberals that are pervasive throughout our society. Donald Trump President Trump has been talking about for some time the movement that is his and that propelled him to the White House. But there is, I think, a significantly larger movement right now that reaches from academia to business to media to our public education system. It is absolutely pervasive in our society.
Now, why is it a threat, though? Aren't Americans entitled to have left-wing views if they want to?
Absolutely. It's not a question of of rights. It's a question of a difference in degree here and the animus that has been created by the tactics that they're employing. I didn't mention politics, where we were watching in the U.S. Senate, whether it be the demonstrations against a president who hadn't even been in office, but a matter of hours before there were protests, 500,000 people in the streets of Washington, D.C. It is an animus and an activism that means to destroy, not simply delegitimize a presidency, but to destroy a federal government right now that is under the control of the President of the United States.
Do you think this is organized? We did a story a few weeks back on George Soros funding a lot of these groups that organize the protests. It's, he's here, the money goes to a variety of different groups. The groups dominate social media. They tell people where to go and what to do. So in that way, it is organized. Do you think it's organized beyond that?
Yes, I do. And I think that Soros has created a web that is dedicated to dysfunction, disruption, and deviation from what have been the norms.
The traditional norms of America. He doesn't like the way the country's structured.
He does not. And there is no countervailing influence. The Republican Party is not a countervailing organization in terms of political, economic, social power to that of the Democratic Party and its web of interest. And yet they lost. And they lost because of one Donald J. Trump. I would submit to you that if it were not for the arrival of a highly energetic, absolutely committed populist, Donald Trump, there is no way the Republicans could have won.
Pretty good. I like that. Now, we're putting aside al-Qaeda, Iranian nukes, this kind of thing. Obviously, that's a physical threat to all of us. My pick is, and you touched on it, higher education. Okay, because what's happening now is no longer are the colleges and universities in America teaching the Socratic method, which is ancient Greece, Socrates, where you teach children and young adults to be skeptical, to question, to find to find knowledge and to find the truth as they see it. That's gone. It's indoctrination and propaganda now at about 75% of the major universities. So what are you turning out? You're turning out the very people that you talked about, these zealots who will not even debate. if you disagree with them, you're dangerous, you're evil, you're wrong. And
you're to be destroyed, or you're to be utterly ignored.
You're a racist, you're a bigot. And you see this on college campuses, that if you are not a student who buys into this far-left agenda, they ostracize you. It's harder for you to even function.
And as you watch their control over our society, it moves to public unions, public employee unions.
But they're waning.
But absolutely, but still hold 35% of all union jobs are held in the public sector. But to academia itself, one of the most recent studies shows a ratio of 11-to-1 liberal to conservative or Republican.
Professors.
Absolutely.
Right.
And they inculcate, they indoctrinate, and they're not educated.
And that, down the road, and not too far down the road, is going to cause an enormous problem for this country. Lou Dobbs, everybody. Isn't he a genius? Let's give him a hand.
Thank you very
much. We come right back. Another genius, Miller. Somebody stole Tom Brady's Super Bowl jersey. And President Obama kite surfing. Why not? Miller is next. Thanks for staying with us. I'm Bill O'Reilly. In the Miller Time segment tonight, two hot topics. Barack Obama kite surfing with a very rich guy. And New England Patriots quarterback Tom Brady trying to figure out who took his Super Bowl jersey.
The jersey, I put it in my bag, and then I came out, and it wasn't there anymore. So it's unfortunate, because that's a nice piece of memorabilia. So if it shows up on eBay somewhere, someone let me know. Try to track that down.
Well, Texas authorities are taking it seriously. They've called in the Texas Rangers to help solve the Brady mystery. Joining us now from Santa Barbara, California, Dennis Miller. You didn't take the jersey, did you, Miller?
No, I got two theories. Either Bernie Sanders took it, or half of it, laying claim to it, or, and this is who I think really took it, I think Roger Goodell took it. I think Goodell has an unrequited man crush on Tom Brady. You always hurt the one you love. And I think he feels if he owns this thing, that at least somewhere down the road, Tom will have to visit him and ask for the jersey back, and maybe they can have a rapprochement. I don't think he's ever recovered from the marriage to Giselle.
Okay,
I think Goodell is crushed.
Just to explain to the non-sports crowd, Roger Goodell, the commissioner of the NFL, Deflategate got Brady suspended for 4 games where the ball was too light. And they suspected the quarterback took the...
Billy, what do you think they're like? What do you think the fans out there are like Burgess Meredith in that bank vault on the Twilight Zone?
No, there are some non-sports fan. They don't know what you're talking about, Miller, and it's my job to get everyone involved here. But now, right, Bernie Sanders, why would he want Tom Brady's jersey?
Well, he just wants half of everybody's everything, so it fell under that purview.
He was more than half.
I think that these things are worth a lot of money. Now, for instance, I know when we're out on the road together doing the show, and you just wipe your brow with a piece of Factor gear and throw it into the crowd, the ladies go absolutely crazy. And when you just came out in Reading, Pennsylvania in that pair of no-spin culottes, I'm telling you, they were fainting away. It was like Engelbert Factor Dink. Yeah. Please release me, let me go.
Got it.
The talking points don't love you anymore.
None of that ever happened. Now, Richard Branson, very rich guy, owns a lot of airlines and owns an island down in the Caribbean, and he's hanging with the former president of the United States, Barack Obama, and they're kite surfing, Miller.
Well, you know who wanted in on that? Billy Clinton, because they told him the Branson owned Virgin. And I see the kite surfing here. I think that used to be Lurch Carey's rice bowl to his old lady forbade him from doing it anymore. I think John Kerry proved that this is a great sport for lightweights, because you don't even have to have a wind. You can get up there and just keep going. I'll tell you one thing Obama hasn't been doing since he got out is going back to Chicago, because it's too dangerous back there.
Well, there's not a lot of kite surfing in Chicago. There's not a lot of that going on.
No. There's a lot of kiting checks back there with Danny Rostenkowski. But libs are like fire ants, Billy. They croak the host organism, and like Obama's moving on to D.C., they're looking for the next dreamsicle wrapper to suck on. So he's not going back to Chicago. What Obama should do is he should host The Apprentice. They should switch jobs because Arnold's not doing well, and I think Obama should be the host of The Apprentice.
Now, can you see in 4 or 8 years, depending on how he does in the White House, Donald Trump kite surfing then after he leaves office? Can you see that?
Well, when I think of Trump and anything nautical, it's that his hair often reminds me of the big wave at the beginning of Hawaii Five-0, where it's just coming in, and Kono, a Zulu, is surfing in it. Or it reminds me of the Ocean Spray Cranberry Juice cocktail logo, where it's just coming over. So if he's going to go nautical Billy, I think he goes like that. Or maybe he ends up like Quincy, Jack Klugman, laying on that catamaran where the hot chick puts a little SPF 30 on him. You know, Melania.
Dennis Miller, everyone.
I didn't even understand the last half of that.
I can't. I had a hard enough time with Goodell. And here's a suggestion. If you're looking for a good Valentine's Day present, the flowers and candy getting kind of old, are they not? There are a few tickets left to see Miller, Waters, and me in Omaha and Tacoma, Washington. All the other shows are sold out, but those two have a few tickets. They're in March, end of March. Details on BillO'Reilly.com. Also, my shirt maker, pretty nifty here, right? High Bar, having some kind of special for Valentine's Day. So, ladies, want to sharpen the guys up? Go to highbarshirts.com. Martha McCallum on deck with the happiest states in the Union and an amazing crime story. Martha, moments away. Back in the book segment tonight, did you see that awful crime in New York City? And it may be solved. 6 months ago, 30-year-old Karina Ventrano was found brutally choked to death in Queens. She was jogging in a park. Leads were few. But a stop and frisk incident apparently led to the capture of a suspect. Here now to tell us more, Fox News anchor Martha McCallum is here at 7 o'clock Eastern Time, right before the factor. How did detectives crack this case?
So essentially through the stop and frisk law, which we know has been minimized further and further with each settlement case, but they had gone through all of the prior criminal cases. They couldn't find anything. They had DNA from her body, from underneath her fingernails.
Let's just stop. So the poor woman struggled and had DNA for the assailant under her fingertips. So they had that part of the DNA. So they were now looking for people who were hanging around that park in Queens, correct?
They had combed through all the prior criminal records. They found nothing. But when they went to the stop and frisk file, they found a guy who they had talked to a couple of times for loitering essentially in that area, public urination, that kind of thing. No criminal. He
was issued a citation for public urination.
That's right. He's Chanel Lewis, 20 years old, who you see in these pictures, who's been arrested. So if it weren't for the fact that they had stopped and frisked him at some point, there's no way that they would have found this guy.
they get him, and I'm sure a number of other people who they stopped and frisked in that area, and they interview them.
That's right.
Do we know if they had a warrant to get his DNA?
No, once they took him into custody, they arrested him, they got the DNA, and now they were able to
An interesting legal question, and I don't know the answer to this, whether you're allowed to take a hair out of his head or you spit in a cup or whatever. I don't know.
I think there's a myriad of ways to get his DNA that he may or may not have been aware of, and whether or not there's a warrant is something that his attorneys will no doubt be looking into, as public attorney.
But they don't even need that because, according to the police, he confessed.
Yeah, that's
Once they brought him in, he confessed to the crime.
Yeah.
So here's the upshot. The stop and frisk they did in that park led to them to Chanel Lewis, who then confessed to the crime, so the police say. Almost the same day, the New York City authorities announced, because of an ACLU stop and frisk lawsuit, the ACLU is driving this anti-stop and frisk, in a housing project, all right, that now police cannot stop people hanging around a housing project selling drugs.
Yeah, all of these, privately owned properties that have apartment buildings had asked the police to help them keep people out of the area.
They wanted the cops in.
Or if they were hanging out in the doorways to protect the people who live there.
Right.
But then there have been all of these lawsuits. This was the final one that really chipped away at all the stuff.
And the New York City authorities, sure. Now we won't have the cops in the housing projects, so the dope dealers can go in and stay all night.
People who lived in the buildings said that it was unfair to them, that they were being harassed by the police, they say, for stop and frisk.
About 2 or 3 of them, not most of them.
But that was their argument.
Right, and the ACLU, of course, good. All right, let's do a happier thing. Here are the happiest states in America. Put them up on the screen. Hawaii, Alaska, South Dakota, Maine, and Colorado. Why are they happy, McCallum?
Shocking, right? I mean, who wouldn't want to live in
Hawaii? We know. We know that.
I mean, Hawaii obviously is.
Alaska's pretty darn cold up there.
Alaska's cold, but people are very happy about, sort of their social well-being in Alaska. Apparently, they have a lot of good friends and they huddle together against the cold. Perhaps that has something to do with it.
Yeah.
Their,
physical
surroundings, their relationships, social, all of that is very.
Maine, who knew Maine?
I love Maine. I mean, what's not to love about Maine?
Lobsters and everything.
It's an absolutely beautiful place, and people are happy in Maine.
Lobsters are happy, and the people are happy in Maine. Everybody's happy.
I'm happy in New Jersey, but it didn't show up very high.
No, New Jersey is not one of the happiest places. I used to live there, and it's a lot of reasons why.
It's so much happier since Bill left. I don't know.
No, that's true. The happiness quotient, as soon as I crossed the George Washington Bridge, everybody got a little more mirthful. All right, here are the unhappiest states. Let's put them up on the screen. West Virginia, Kentucky, Oklahoma, Indiana, and Arkansas. Why are they unhappy?
I mean, obviously there's a lot of poverty in this area. This is the Appalachia area that runs through here. And it's also interesting to note that, some of these areas are where Donald Trump did fairly well because
they were unhappy and they want somebody else.
The obesity rate is high. The health quotient is very low in these areas. Diabetes, all of that leads to these places to be.
Most of it has to do with poverty. Most of it, whether you're feeling good or not.
Yep.
All right, Martha McCallum, check her out at 7. A fact or tip of the day. I think we all need some laughs. Am I right on that? The tip, moments away. Fact or tip of the day, some good comedy in a moment. But first, the mail. James Murphy, Drexel Hill, Pennsylvania. Mr. O, the negative press on President Trump, very disrespectful. Can a former governor really say he wants to smash the president's face? Can rappers verbally assault him? Where does it end? It doesn't end, James. The worst part of being in the public eye is all the smearing that is taking place in this country. John Adavari, Kennesaw, Georgia. In my opinion, President Bush the Younger allowing the press to vilify him without much response led to the election of Barack Obama. John Feehan, West Hartford, Connecticut. For me, it is energizing to see the president on the battlefield hitting back against the press. Lana Lundgren, McCall, Idaho. Mr. O'Reilly, it is President Trump, not Mr. Trump. You misspoke. Calling the commander-in-chief Mr. is an acceptable and respectful title used by journalists for centuries, Lana. You don't want to say the word president over and over and over and over. You got to have something else. Allison Walsh, New Haven, Connecticut. Mr. O'Reilly, I'm wondering who the cable news competition are that hate President Trump and why you think they hate him. From your letterhead, Allison, I see you work at Yale. So I know you're smart enough to figure out the questions you just asked. Rick Merritt, Arlington, Texas. Bill, you were wrong on everything last night. So what else is new, Rick? John Dewar, Glasgow, Scotland. O'Reilly, did Senator Schumer give you the Putin question to show President Trump is not a polished politician? How did you figure that out, John? Sure, old Chuck meandered on up to my office, slipped the question under the door with a little note. Amazing how you figured that out. Bob Levinson, Las Vegas. O'Reilly, you have become just plain boring. Become? I was always that way, Bob. Mike Cummings, South Lyon, Michigan. O'Reilly, I noticed you used the 1965 clipboard while interviewing the president. Now that's old school. I am old school, Mike, which is why I wrote the book. Out March 28th. I love my clipboard. Tricia Bowler, Diamond Bar, California. I'm reading Killing the Rising Sun and wondering whether to let my 13-year-old grandson read it. He's old enough, Tricia. The boy likes history and action. He'll like the book. Can't do them all, but I want to wish Ann DiBianca in Staten Island and Peggy Ott out in California happy birthdays. Both are 100 years old. Way to go. Finally tonight, the fact or tip of the day. In these very intense times, we all need some laughs, right? The other night at the Paramount Theater in Huntington, Long Island, I saw a comedian named Sebastian Maniscalco.
Look around you. Everybody's just walking around. Yourself? They call it a selfie. I can't even say the word without sweating. I can't stand the word. But taking a lonely. Do you know how alone you gotta be?
You gotta be. I love him. Sebastian said ran about an hour, no dead spots, laughs all the way through. Guy's great. Check him out. Factor tip of the day. And that is it for us tonight. Please check out the Fox News Factor website, which is different from BillO'Reilly.com. Also, we'd like to spout out about the Factor from anywhere in the world. O'Reilly at FoxNews.com, O'Reilly at FoxNews.com. Name and town if you wish to opine. Word of the day, do not be a snollygoster. And get this, the Merriam-Webster online dictionary has put snollygoster back in the rundown, thanks to the Factor. I'm glad we can help with the English language. Snollygoster is back. He's back. It's gotta be. Again, thanks for watching us tonight. I'm Bill O'Reilly. Please remember that the spin now stops right here, because we're definitely looking out for you.